But now, with those things aside, let me say a few words about our artist, Ronald McKean. Ronald is the director of music ministries and organist here at St. Joseph Catholic Church in Old Mission, San Jose. He directs multiple choir groups and oversees the 17th century style Rosales Opus 14 Spanish organ that you'll hear tonight. Formerly, he was director and organist at First Presbyterian Church in Oakland, where he performed concerts on the Rosales Opus 16 organ. Mr. McKean studied under Thomas Binkley at Indiana University to earn his Master's of Music degree and Performer's Certificate in 17th century Italian and Spanish keyboard music. He tutored under the likes of Lorette Goldberg, Harold Vogel, Anthony Newman, and Leonard Bernstein, and he was professor of organ and harpsichord at California State University, East Bay. Mr. McKean has competed nationally and internationally, winning prizes in the San Anselmo Festival, the Haarlem Festival in Holland, and the Boston American Guild of Organists Convention. In 2008, he won first prize at the Alienor Harpsichord Composition Competition for his work, Sacred Harp Dyads for Violin and Harpsichord. Mr. McKean has conducted improvisation workshops. In 2010, Juilliard School graduate students premiered his competition, 3 Etudes for Organ 2006. Mr. McKean's recordings of the music of Spain and Portugal are available tonight in the back for your purchase if you'd like to, or they're also available at our gift shop on a different day. And with that, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Ronald McKean. Let's welcome him.
Thank you very much, Gary. I really appreciate that introduction. None of it's true. Actually, some of the greatest time I've ever had in studying music was at Cal State Hayward. And at the time, they had a really bustling program. They had great teachers and great students. And one of my influential people at Cal State Hayward was William R. Shannon. Bill, stand up, please. He's back there. I rediscovered some of Bill's work that he had transcribed nearly the entire works of Juan Cabanilles, who you'll hear, who is probably the greatest of the Spanish composers that exist today. And before I go on, I do want to issue some thanks to Gary and Nancy for this and for starting the weekday that happened. I can't do it without, of course, Debbie Rosetto. And I really appreciate all the work. And of course the staff and the engineering staff up there who do things I don't even understand. So anyway, so I'm going to begin with talking about what Spanish music is. Spain was cut off, well, not really cut off, but it is sort of isolated. And the styles became very endemic to the Spanish culture. And I don't really have time to go into it. It would take several lectures to go into Spanish culture and what how the music was reflected. But suffice to say, the church basically was a place that held what we would call the sacred and the secular. It isn't so much that the secular world was separate, it was that it was incorporated into the church. And so you would find music of many styles. There were rules. They didn't allow certain instruments in church, but they managed to sneak in, you know. But the organs in Spain were a bit strange, and I say that in tongue-in-cheek a bit because the organ in most of the Catholic settings was not accompanimental. It did not accompany, in this day and age, it did not accompany hymns like they that didn't start until after the Reformation, basically. But the organ was an instrument that gave key tones to chanting, and the organ participated in what we called the alternatim. So whatever the chanting happened, then the organ responded. It was back and forth. And the organ also was instrumental in revealing the various pomp and circumstance that you would have with royals that would attend church, or royal functions that would be in there. One of the most interesting things about Spanish organ music is that it doesn't look religious. Now, what I mean by that is the titles of it are simple, toccata or tiento, which is the same thing. And in the program, if you look in the program, you'll see that it says, for the left hand with two voices in the bass, and in Spanish, of course. And the idea is that they told you where to put your hands and how to use the organ, but they didn't necessarily tell you what stops that you were going to use. But they did have interesting titles like Battalia or Batala, and these what I would call a militant mysticism. There was a type of sort of a fetish about the military and the grandeur of it, the conqueror. And so the organ just simply reflected that. And nowhere better does it reflect that than these pipes up here. You see those? They're horizontal. If you turn around, you can see them easier than on this. The horizontal pipes, those are called the clarines. And they are a reed. The trumpet in the real life is not a reed, it's a brass instrument. But there is a beating reed in there that's rather snarly and majestic. Obviously there's faces there. This was very common in Spanish and even more in Mexican organs, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. That's Father Norquit. That is Manuel Rosales. And that's Carrie Quaid. That's Kevin Cartwright, a builder. My friend Lynn Upham, who died recently, is also up there. He did some work on this organ as well. And Manuel Rosales is this organ couldn't be more different than other organs that he's built, the Walt Disney Symphony Hall and the Oakland First Presbyterian Church. Very different organs than this. This is historic, but it's also contemporary. Why? Because if you scroll down or up, there's pedals here, which the Spanish and the Mexican organs didn't really have pedals in the sense that we have pedals up here. Could you move this up a bit? No, down. This perspective. And if you keep going down and down and down, you will see a bench. Okay. These are pedals. They're the same as the lower octave of lower two octaves of the keyboard, meaning the same notes. They play different notes too, and this comes from a German tradition, but the Spanish used to have little knobs, and that they would play, so they didn't have these pedals. Now, if you scroll up a bit, these things are, if you push them down, you'll hear bird sounds, which is the pipes are in water, or in antifreeze in this case. And another one is bells. So they patajitos and the campanella, whatever it is. And then scroll up a bit, if you could. The stops on the organ, here's the keys. Now, here's what's unusual about Spanish, Mexican organs. Right here in this C sharp, this is this side of the stops, and C is these stops. And that means that you get two organs in one. It's very clever. So you can have the melody playing here and the accompaniment playing here. Or, as was common in Spain, you could have, and the third piece on this program does this. The right hand is holding notes, and the left hand is playing the melody. It's not really a melody. I'll talk about that in a minute. So what's the difference between Spanish and Mexican organs? When the Spaniards brought these technologies over to Mexico, it wasn't long before the Mexicans figured out their own style, what they wanted, and the broader sound of the principals and some of the toy stops. If you would scroll up that way, so that, yeah, there. And these are the stops, and they correspond to different lengths. And the lower the length of the pipe is, the higher the pipe is, the lower sound is. So if you turn around and you see, I don't know if you can see it, but on the right side, in the back, you see these tall wooden things. They're almost hidden. I don't know if you can see it. Those are 16-foot pipes. They're not actually 16 foot because they cap it, and therefore the airflow goes doubles and then it sounds doubles in length. And anyway, the front pipes are your main sound. That is the true. They call those the principal, or in this case, the flautado, which is the space of a hand. And so these are all we get to work with. But in those combinations, you find a lot of variation, a lot of tonal variation in that. So these organs were used also is in a type of entertainment in a way. A lot of the music that I'm going to play is very strange, and that is because we're used to, when you hear music, you turn on the radio, what do you hear first? You hear a melody, right? Usually, a melody. Well, this music is more what I would say is objective. In other words, it's structured a lot differently. For one thing, Spanish organ music is so very tight, and that is that it's a minute ideas, kernels of ideas that are exchanged in different voices, and at times sounds very vocal. Then all of a sudden, typically Spanish, it'll break into a set of variations. And it doesn't really seem to make sense to our way of thinking, because we're used to, there's the chords and here's the tune. But that's not how they thought. And in fact, you'll hear some of that. The last thing that, one of the things I wanted to touch on was that when I start out, you're going to hear the full organ up to what is called the lleno, which is the full part, the mixtures. But during the second piece is very quiet, and it uses only the flautado, these facing pipes with the faces on them. And it's slow and distant and meditative, and it's the kind of thing that you would start to yawn. Okay? It's okay. This music is highly structured and very objective, and that's just the way it is. But in all of that, the Spanish managed to do some very clever things. For one thing, I never communicated this with Bill, but you've heard of the golden mean, right? The near 1/3 ratio that you find, right? In the paintings, in Da Vinci and whatnot. It's not uncommon in music to generally say that during that golden mean is a rough area where something happens. And in this tiento, on that second piece, he saves only one note for that point of time. Now, it's not literally the golden mean, but it's golden mean-ish. In other words, it's that rough area of 2/3. And that's something that I believe is intentional. Just one note. Here you are on a limited keyboard, and you save it for that. There's other things that happen in that music, particularly with that composer. In the battaglia that you see with the punto bajo, which is the point, bass point. That one has also a relationship with the golden mean, and at the very end, and that's where the triumph happens. So in battle pieces, it starts out predictably with the attack, the retreat, the death march, and there's no death march in this one, but the death march, and then the victory. This was a depiction of the battle, and we find that. So the opening of this concert is going to start with a Salve Regina tune. Now, what they would do is they'd only use a kernel of they didn't play the whole Salve Regina chant, so just a kernel of 5 or 6 notes, and you'll hear that all the way through. Here's the challenge with this kind of music. It's not your everyday music. It's a little challenging to listen to. So here's what I'd like you to do, if you can, is to pick out certain voices and follow it if you can, or certain sounds, and at the exclusion of others. You might find that you can hear certain pitch relationships, you might hear a tune, you might hear a relationship of an idea to some other idea. It's rather like Renaissance art. Well, it's Renaissance music, really. The last thing I would say is that the Spanish music, the way it was written was a different system harmonically than ours. Our system basically grew out of 18th century common practice harmony, but before then they used what was called modes, and I would be safe to say almost nobody understands modes because they get complicated and they change with different composers. So you'll see things in there that say the first tone, the fourth tone. Well, it doesn't matter. They get it mixed up sometimes, and then they're not always clear. They weren't really musicologists or music historians, though they were accurate in what they wanted to communicate. So just so you know, this is a hand, okay? There's a guy in about the year 1055 named Guido, and Guido of Arezzo. And Guido developed a harmonic system based on the hexachord of notes that you could find in different knuckles and direction to part of the hand. And that's how they learned how to sight sing. And that's how they learned the relationships with chords and notes. And that this hand was a way that they could look at when they were singing complicated music, because they didn't have scores. No, they didn't have an open score where everybody, oh, I'm reading the tenor part. No, read the alto. No, they had separate pieces of music, and the only way they could govern it was by a thing called the takt. So the takt was a beat of time that was constant throughout the whole thing, and you're going to hear that too. You'll also hear some Castilian rhythms, which is unique to Spain, probably adapted from the Hasidic tradition, but there's a lot of that kind of music. At the very end, you're going to hear the Tarantella, which is a Mexican folk song that came from Spain by a guy named Gaspar Sanz, and it breaks into some pretty wild stuff, and it's the only time in this concert that you're going to see feet moving a little bit more than you did at the beginning, okay? So I'd like to thank you for this breathless introduction to Spanish music. I might even say a few things while I'm in between some of the work that might need some explanation. All right, so thank you very much. Enjoy the concert, and I will hand this over to Mr. Derigi.
All right. Well, while Ron's making his way up to the organ and to get organized, just go over a few logistical items. If you just arrived during Ron's talk, I want to say welcome to Old Mission San Jose. And again, my name is Gary Derigi. I'm I run the mission along with my wife Nancy. And before we begin our concert, I have just a few things to go over. And you may want to stand and try to stretch a little bit before the concert if you like, or just remain seated while I go over these items. As a reminder, again, if you just arrived, please keep your cell phones on mute. If you need a restroom, you go simply through that side door, along the pathway, through the white gate, and the restrooms are on your right-hand side. Now, I must say these are one-at-a-time arrangements, so if you show up and the door is closed, simply knock and then enter, and you should be just fine. At the conclusion of the concert, I really hope you will join us for our reception right here on the patio garden. It's well lit, and you have your little jackets on, so you'll be just fine. And they will be, our wonderful volunteers will be serving champagne, fruit agua fresca, coffee, and Mexican desserts. And our beautiful patio garden is just the right venue for that sort of a great reception. Okay, I think Ron's making his way up there and nearly ready. And so what I will do is turn it over to him. Okay.
The electricity did not go out. This is Ryan Lee, who's my organ pumper and stop puller. Just a word about the next piece. So here's the thing. The Spanish also would have the right hand at normal pitch and the left hand at an octave higher, but it sounds an octave lower. Anyway, it's written the same way. But the effect of it is that it's very intertwined. I'm grateful that Bill arranged this so that you could actually read it, because these were originally open score, and some of the additions had it voices crossed so that stems going up and down in every direction, it's impossible to read. So this is a nice addition to be able to read from. The feature stop on this is called the cornet, and it was designed to imitate the cornetto, which was an instrument that was like a substitute for trumpets. Trumpets were not allowed in the church by and large, so they used cornettos. And that's kind of the sound. The left hand is going to be a mixture and a few stops, but nothing at the normal pitch level. So it has a shimmering effect. It's a very short piece and very difficult, by the way. A word about this next piece by Araujo, who was one of the great Spanish composers of the early 17th century, late 17th century, late 16th century, early 17th century. Anyway, I got all this mixed up. Anyway, Araujo. So this is also in the style, he says, in the mode of a canción, which is like a canzona. Not quite sure what he meant by that, except that there's episodes of lightness and episodes of heaviness. It ends grandly, but you find that the opening is very dark and sinister, and then it breaks into something not so dark, and it keeps going back and forth with this. So Ryan Lee here is going to be helping me pull stops so that I can make this actually work. Now, one last piece that is going to use the hand pump. It has to wait to turn it off before you can turn it on. Hand pumping an organ is interesting because what you want to do is create a static pressure in any organ, in any mechanical feature of an organ. You want to have a steady airflow. But that's not always desirable. An organ has to breathe like a person. And so when you're pumping the organ, the defect that was not solvable in the pre-electricity became a desire in recent years to have unsteady wind. And that's an interesting phenomenon. So you can begin pumping now. But what pumping does here is it creates a nice, a gentler kind of sound, a sweeter sound. These are all subjective terms, but basically it's less balanced. When it's a constant flow, then its balance is predictable and you have a steady flow going through the pipes and they're consistent. But sometimes you don't really want that. So we made it possible, Manuel made it possible to pump this organ, and of course it's practical in the event of a structured blackout or whatever those are. So this last number before the last number is this is new to me, and it was given to me a few weeks ago, about a month ago, by Bill Shannon, and it's a cute little thing. It has and features these trumpet stops right above me here, in the left hand, and it doesn't say that in the score. It only says that there's two voices at the entrance, but it's in the bass, and so I'm using artistic license to do that, to play. And also, I'm going to include some bird sounds, which you will hear. I won't even bother showing it to you right now. Thank you very much. And now, differencia sobre means variations on this tarantella. What is a tarantella? It's a dance, and it's usually in three with a three and another type of three, a six and a three, really. 1, 2, 3. Oh, there you are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's later on. But the dance, and what had happened is like so many of the tunes in Europe, Central Europe, by the 18th century, is when the Spaniards came over to Mexico and the Latin America, anyway, hello. What had happened was that the dances that the Spaniards saw in Mexico and in Guatemala and places like that, they took over to Spain, and it reinterpreted. By the time they ended up in the 18th century, what was a fast, seductive dance turned out to be a very slow, somber dance. Leave it to the Germans to have done that. But anyway, that was the saraband, as we come to know it, that started in Zarabanda, which was an American, Mexican. So there's other exchanges, cross-cultural exchanges. Now, let me just say that there's not an awful lot of organ music. In fact, I know very little organ music that's in Mexico. That might be because the libraries are reluctant to let people in, much as Spain was following the Franco period. But nonetheless, they wrote a lot of choral music. There's also a lot of guitar music, and these dances were interchanged by vocal pieces. So this one is a combination of, and I had written down some of them that I'd researched. This piece right here. And I wrote it by hand because the computer kept messing it up. Anyway, so I've got this here, and it's one of them is a tune by Gaspar Sanz, who was a Spaniard, but his music found its way into Spain and was reinterpreted. I'm not a vocal expert in the vocal transmission of music from Spain to Mexico, but suffice to say, it did change, and a lot of the chords remind one of a fandango. So if you look up the history of fandango and tarantella, you will see that they cross so much as, might as well just call it all the same thing. It's quite an amazing dance. So I'm going to start with my feet. Thank you very much. Anybody feel like dancing? Well, thank you for coming. Let's enjoy a reception, and thank you very much. I want to thank the church, and may I say, Soli Deo Gloria.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron. We hope you enjoyed the concert. And at this point in time, I'd like to take up our free will offering. It's for the restoration of the Mission Museum. And they'll be passing the baskets now. Or if you'd rather, go to mission225.org and hit the donate button and make a donation. Thank you very much for coming, and please enjoy the concert, the reception.